Once again, welcome to everybody for our spiritual get-together for October 2022. So the topic that was given for this meeting was the practical applications of spirituality. You see, in my opinion, first of all, one must be in self-absorption. And when does one actually reach that state of self-absorption? When one realizes the consciousness to be the changeless reality, and one realizes that all images, you see, is none other than consciousness itself that we are dealing. So when we look at the practical applications of spirituality, when a spiritual student is progressing, towards that self-absorption of realizing the presence of consciousness and realizing everything which is in the form of images as well to be none other than the consciousness. You see, naturally, when you go into meditation, when you philosophically reflect, you see, on spiritual topics, that takes you away from your normal, day-to-day run-of-the-mill activity, your normal thoughts, your normal feelings, your normal activity. And it, at least for the time that you are actually, in meditation or in a spiritual discussion, some peace actually is found. But you see, the real practical application of spirituality is that when you are in self-absorption, right, then you see the knowledge that sages possess comes down to you, and you find a state of unbroken peace, a state of unbroken love, you see, which is coupled with patience. And it doesn't matter, you see, what events, you see, whatever is actually going on, is it a difficult period that you're going through, or is it a happy period you're going through? Keep in mind that, you see, everything which is there in our life is only transitory, bound to come to an end. So when we talk about practical applications of spirituality, first of all, we must be on a, spiritual path. And we must be associated with sages or human beings who are actually illuminated and have reached that state. Sage Ramana and Rishi Master Byansa Duno are shining examples, of the practical applications of spirituality. They came, to help humanity. They helped humanity. They were not affected by, anything, whatever went on in their personal lives. And then finally, they left their physical form. So, we can have a good discussion on this. So we have got some of our, spiritual speakers, participants who will give their views on this. So I'll request Neeruji to, give her views on the practical applications of spirituality. Neeruji, over to you.
Thank you, Anilji. So let me share my slides. All right, so the topic that we have today is practical applications of spirituality. So the main topic of this discussion is going to be what actually we mean by spirituality and how do we apply spirituality to our lives. Being spiritual means knowing what we essentially are. Normally in our life, we live as a personality, or we live as a physical being with a mind attached to it, as the thoughts, emotions, memories, likings, and dislikings. But the personality is not our truth. Personality is limited as it is dependent on the physical sense of being. In spirituality, we inquire to know the true sense of being. Once we know the true sense of being, we live as that for the rest of the life. Applying spirituality means to remain as the truth. Sages preach that our truth is consciousness. We also refer to that as awareness. That basically means we are awareness, which lends consciousness to the body mind for experiencing and perceiving what's happening around and internally as well in the mind. For simplicity purpose, I will use the term consciousness. The body mind is alive as the consciousness is keeping it alive. Consciousness exits the body at death, leaving the body as a lifeless object. Therefore, living as consciousness is the true living. Living as a personality is a fake living. But then, what to do with personality? Should we care for personality? Yes, we should care for personality, but at the same time, we should acknowledge that the personality is an expression of consciousness in a physical and mental sense to work for the lifetime. We may refer to personality as the personal self. So there are two forms of our existence. One is our own self, and second is our personal self. Applying spirituality means to distinguish between our own self and the personal self. The purpose is to recognize our own self and bring that to the front of our existence. Then, even though the personality will function at the front line of our physical existence, it will be there only in appearance. Let's take an example to explain what I mean by that. We know these days almost everyone uses some digital channel to get some information or to buy something. Like we go to a website like Amazon, or maybe we use a mobile app. Every digital channel has an interface, like you click a button or you click a menu option to get somewhere on the website. The website or the mobile app responds by giving an instruction, or it takes you to a different page or portal. So even though you are interacting with the interface, it is actually the backstage applications that are carrying out the operation by rapidly communicating with you for what you want to do. This precisely describes the individual absorbed in the own self. The personality is compared to the digital interface that appears to be functioning in the day-to-day life, performing the roles and fulfilling the responsibilities, appearing to be creative, passionate, dutiful, ignorant, or indulgent, etc. However, all those are the expressions of the backstage guy, that is the consciousness, which is operating the personality. So consciousness manifests its diverse characteristics as the personal self. The purpose is to acknowledge that the real operator is consciousness and see that at all fronts. While living in the form of a personality, see the personality is none other than consciousness. It is shifting our being from the personality position to consciousness position. Many seekers say that all this is theoretically making sense, but how to experientially live as consciousness? What's the way to find our own self and to be one with that? In our spiritual meetings this year, and I have presented some exercises that could help to be one with our own self. Our own self is present at all times. It lives in us as us, but it remains unnoticed due to the false identification we develop with the personal self or the mind. So due to the mind noise keeps going in the form of thoughts, feelings, we remain occupied with the personal self all the times. and generally we don't recognize our own self. Although it's not possible to get rid of the mind, as it's the mind that enables the body to function in life. Nevertheless, focusing on the own self empowers the self, and then the self matures to a level that it overpowers the mind. So gradually the mind noises get dimmer and dimmer, and then it starts to rest. Then we have a feeling of space. Then peace starts to come. As the seeker concentrates on self and remains as the self, the state of spaciousness becomes permanent. It stays all the time, even if the mind is restless and the individual engages with the world as the personality. But then the mind does not harm the own self. Mind will not have the capacity to control the self, as the self is then much more powerful than the personality. The personality feels like a tiny creature in that vastness of self. Now, the thing is how to focus on our own self. One exercise which seekers could try when we get up in the morning, before we start our day, uh, let's pay attention to what's present as what you are present. I'm using the second person just for the sake of explaining the point. So you may notice that you are thinking something. Maybe a thought comes about the work which you need to complete during the day. Look carefully. What was happening before you got up? As what you were present before you woke up? Was the thought present? Was any feeling present? Nothing was present. You were nothingness before you woke up. In nothingness appeared the waking state. Could you try to remain as the nothingness for, let's say, 2 minutes? When people do yoga, they set a timer to remain in a particular yogic posture for 1 minute or 2 minutes. The yoga for spirituality is to remain as the nothingness. If you cannot get away from thought for 2 minutes, let's say, okay, try for 1 minute in the beginning, and then gradually we can increase the duration. Seeker might doubt, how will they sustain the nothingness while working? When we realize our own self and see the personal self as dwelling in the self, then no need remains to get the personal self away. The key point is to get us to a state that nothingness remains, even if the personal self is engrossed in the day-to-day activity. Focusing on the own self is the only way to come to that state. So for the exercise, if the personal self remains sticky and doesn't let the seeker to stick to the real self, we can try a breathing exercise. So take a deep breath. So inhale the air. So when you exhale the air, pretend that you are throwing the personal self out of your being. So it's like, take a deep breath. And when the air is out, the personal self is also, so we pretend that it is also leaving the body with the air that's going out of the body. Take one more breath. The air gets in, then throw the personal identity out of you with the air that you exhale. So do the breathing in and out several times and just remain as if there is no personality. So when you breathe, the air will go inside, but be careful to not get the personal self with the air that is coming into the body. So here, one thing also to be clarified. Personal self mainly means psychological sense, like the thoughts and the feelings. The physical body is under the control of psychology. Body just by itself, it's not problematic if the mind noise is not there. So let's focus on the exercise. Air goes inside the body and is thrown out of the body. This is a physical activity. We can do that without a psychological entity attached to that, without a sense of doership attached to that. The action that occurs without the sense of doing and without the conditioning, that action is a cosmic activity that's free of a psychological content or the personal self. Think, what's the sense of being as a person? The sense of being as a person or identification with a person is identifying with flesh and blood and thoughts and emotions. A few weeks ago in our meeting, we did an exercise and we tested everything. We found that we are none of these. We are not flesh, we are not blood, we are not any organ, we are not thought or any emotion that we notice. When the mind noise is not present, notice what's present. You are present. How you are present. Are you present as the body mind? Or there is no mind? Body is there, but notice carefully. Do you feel like just the body? What's that state like? You feel that there is a limitlessness. This limitlessness was present before the thought came. It was present when the thought was present, and it remained present even when the thought ended. Just being present feels like a space without a personal self. There is no personal identity. There is just a silence. So remain as the silence. A thought comes, do not let that come in. If the thought persists, observe the thought coming as if like a movement is happening in a space, like an appearance that's happening, and it's going to go away, after a little while. So do not change your position. Remain as the space. So even if the thought comes, feeling comes, let them come and go. They are not you. You are the space. An impersonal and impartial space, which is without a personal identity. So we were talking about getting the mind away, but we don't mean we are practicing to eliminate the mind. The personal self is an attribute of our real self. It will be completely normal to stay as a person when we end the exercise of breathing the air in and out and start the normal daily routine. But the point is, see where we truly belong, as what we should do the daily activity when we start our day. When we go for a holiday, let's say, just an example, when we go for a holiday and book an accommodation for a few days, we know that we don't actually live there. When the holiday ends, we return to our home. So why should then we stay as a personality? Because personality is here for the lifetime. Our reality is the consciousness. So personality is like a holiday, like an accommodation. So we come here, we use here, we belong to it, but our real place is consciousness that is making it alive. So the purpose of searching our own self is to realize what's the state of being, like what's that state in that we remain as consciousness, just simply being that. So once we know what's that state, we will be able to distinguish the personality and the real self. Distinguishing between the personality and the real self will help in detaching from the personality and attaching to the reality, which is our own self. So when we sincerely practice the distinguishing between personality and the self, you notice the space of self. Keep your attention on the space. The space is of the silence and peace. Sit with that and be one with that. It's simply being present, just like an expansion. See the distinction between mind and space. So even if the thought comes, feel come, you stay as the space. So being aware of our own self, in which all this, the movements like thoughts, activities, everything is appearing, disappearing. So we are engaging with them, but in the sense that we are aware of them, we are not actually them. So it's a change of belief, change of identification. So even if you do that breathing exercise for a short time, it's okay to start with. It will help to nourish the own self. So not entangling with the thoughts, not engaging with the thought as a personal self, but observing the thoughts, remaining completely detached from the personal self. So then when you start the day, start as your own self. Take the silence of the own self with you wherever you go, whatever work you do that in the silence of the self. On the other hand, if we start the day as personal self, we'll keep on referring to the personal self all the day, addressing problems associated with the personal self. So what we should do is to not link up with the personal self. Just be aware of the personal self and remain as your own self. Your own self is the self of himself, herself, myself, everyone's self. So be that. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Neeruji. Quite beautifully put. I presume human life is very important, not to be wasted. We should live as our own self, not the personal self, own self being the light of consciousness. Okay, we will move on to Rajiv ji. Can you please, yeah?
Thank you, thank you, Neeruji. I'll also share some of the slides and take it from there. I'm sure we have all come across this beautiful expression from Sage Ramana Maharishi that your own self-realization is the greatest service you can render to the world. It's a very simple statement and a very simple guide for us. And I'll share a few examples of some personalities that I have come across who have taken this very deeply and sincerely, and many of us are familiar with them. So I'll illustrate this beautiful thought as applied by some of the leading personalities. The first one I'm talking about is a great music director of Indian film industry by the name Naushad Ali. Naushad Saab is a contemporary of Sage Ramana. I don't know whether they traveled a few miles together, but the sincerity, the dedication, the drive is literally parallel. Sage Ramana at a very young age could see that he was to move in a particular direction. Naushad Saab at almost the same age could figure out that music was his destiny. Despite all the odds, social, financial, economic, you talk about anything, he went straight to Bombay at a very young age. Extreme difficulties, extreme challenges, he did manage that. He clearly says that music is the language of God. He illustrates it again and again. He talks about the music coming from, you talk about temple, to talk about church, you talk about any organization. This is what unites us. The beauty is that he was a pioneer at the time when the playback singing was taking shape in India. In fact, it is universal phenomena. And he has picked up key points so that a common person can relate to his or her roots. The music that we have heard along the way in the villages and the suburbs, he worked on that so that uh, an average person can sing along, can play along, and his richness is still admired by many. The other thing which he did manage, and again, it's great credit to him, he has helped many a talent, singers, poets, uh, actors. He has given break to them. And you can see that it is a very honest involvement. It is not just a commercial deal. It is genuine participation in that. Likewise, it is a very common practice that you go deep into the subject. I would share a particular note from his life. At one point, he has gone to his master, his ustad, Jhande Khan Sahab, and they are composing certain piece, and he finds that Jhande Khan Sahab is in tears. He says, "Sir, what happened?" He says, "I don't know. But when I was composing this piece, something took over. That bigger force took over. And I just melted away." And Naushad Sahab says, "This is exactly what happened to me. I composed the same piece. And when I reached that particular point, I am also melting away." Now, this is that sincere devotion to the cause, to the phenomena of music. One more point, which I think is worth mentioning, which is very important for our spiritual practice and development, is the sensitivity to the culture. We all belong to our culture, each one of us in our own ways. Whenever Naushad Sahab is dealing with a subject, he will respect the culture that he is talking about. For instance, there were many a song naturally which were dealing with, say, the Hindu traditional culture, and he is very respectful. He is not ignoring anything which the culture honors. And this has been greatly admired by many of his followers, many of his contemporaries. So as a person, as a personality, it's a great devotion to that pure cause, to that pure energy. I'll take the next step talking about another two wonderful people, which I'm sure many of us have heard about. It's about Gandhiji and Tagore Sahab. Again, they are contemporaries of Sage Ramana, and I'm given to understand that both had very high regards for Sage Ramana. Now, they were very tall personalities for that era. Tagore Sahab went on to get Nobel Prize for his contribution to poetry, Gitanjali. Gandhiji was naturally in the political arena and very well regarded. They both had high admiration for each other, high regards. In fact, the terms were given by them to each other. It is Tagore who gave him the title Mahatma, and Gandhiji gave him the title of Gurudev. The other dimension is that they had difference of opinion. Just to give an example, at one point, Gandhiji has gone to Shanti Niketan, which was the educational establishment from Tagore Sahab, and a young girl approaches Gandhiji and says, "Give me something to live by." And Gandhiji writes in her diary that if you make a commitment, honor that even at the cost of your life. It's a very simple statement that, stick to your word. Tagore Sahab saw that and he was very upset. In the same diary, he wrote his remark that don't chain yourself to the past. Because we always say, the time moves, circumstances change. So Tagore Sahab, not to miss the point, don't chain yourself to the past. Now, there are many other differences we can talk about, but we'll spare that point. despite these apparent differences, there is an underlying richness of friendship, genuine concern. So when Gandhiji used to go on fast, Tagore was worried that he is not losing his health or he is not getting into difficult territory. Tagore himself was in trouble because of some financial issues for Shanti Niketan. Gandhiji offered him substantial help, substantial. So while the superficial ripples do continue, that underlying substratum is intact. And that's what is the foundation of spiritual development. I will take one more step and then leave the floor with you, please. This is my little personal experience. Without naming anyone, I'm just sharing an experience with a colleague that we are both coming from education. Colleague I regard very well even today. We have taught at different stations together. We have worked together. We have enjoyed each other's company and so on. So pretty decent going on. About 7-8 years back, it just happened that a particular class was offered to me. And somehow he got the impression that I had taken the class, I had made use of the opportunity instead of leaving it for him. Now, I was very clear that I had not gone out of the way to gain anything. It was offered to me as a normal professional engagement. I had not sought any business. We get allocations every semester or every term, as the case may be, and this was one of those allocations for me. And he was slightly upset. He didn't hide that. Now, this could have been a very easy parting of ways. But I honored his opinion. I didn't take any offense to it. And in hindsight, it just gradually fizzled away. He's still a great friend. We have worked together on a few other projects over the last couple of years, so that base, that substratum remains intact. And I will conclude with the, again, similar note from Sage Ramana, that what is required to realize the self is to be still. It's a very simple statement. What is easier than that? With that, friends, I'll take leave. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take any questions as needed. Thank you.
Okay, Rajivji. Yeah, thank you. Interesting side of applications of spirituality. And spirituality, you see, consciousness itself is experiencing itself as this changing reality. So, any dimension can be picked up and talked about. Damodaranji, can we please have you on?
Namaskar, Anilji, and pranams to everyone listening. I will certainly look from a different dimension of spirituality. For me, spirituality is more towards universality. That is growing out from your individuality into universality. And there are few guidelines that I always very much respect and revere, and I would like to just throw some lights on that and finally share some practical applications that would be useful right from a person who is a kindergarten aspirants up to the highest realized person, how these reflections on spirituality could be applicable to them. So, as we know that it is from the highest point of view of spirituality, it relates to the self. And the teachings of the great sages and the Shastras, they all proclaim one and the same voice. And the view is that self is all and all is self. So the key thing over here is to stay focused onto the two things which actually bind together. One is unity and the other is oneness. And here I would like to actually give a bit more light into what we call the realizations, which is the core thing. And in the journey of attaining to the self or realizing the self, there are a series of realization occurs which leads to self-realization or knowledge of the self, which is not anything different to even what Buddha has said as an awakening. But we need to also take into account that there is something that we have to always fall back to and and something that can actually support and validate us. And this is where the Shastras come to help us. So Shastras are there only as a guide. The Shastras will not give us the realization. However, at the same time, it is the Shastras that actually validates our realization, all these stages through which we go. And we also find that in that guide, there is a hidden goal as well. You know how Rajiv was saying about music. Music is nothing but a sound. But when you go to something, the very source of that sound, we come to our real self. And these are some of the ways to know that these are the teachings which are there from the Shastras or directly from the realized source, that there is some hidden thing is there which we have to do through our own practice. And it is our own effort, our own sincere effort that actually helps us to get to that realization of the self and finally into self-absorption, that we are not anything that is different from this. I must say something very unique that I have discovered, and I strongly believe in this. And this is what we say, that we are not different, anything different from what the images are. We are also part of the image and we are self. So we are actually in that process of in the changeless reality as well as the changing reality. So we are one and the same, but to put it in a very practical sense of the uniqueness of what it is, that this life we have is a chance to see for ourselves our beginning and our own end, which means that what we are now at this present moment is our complete totality of who we have been right from the beginning till now and till end of creations, as you might say, or when we attain to the full realization of our true nature. And I still have a bit more time, so I will continue with this. So another thing too important is say is we cannot separate ourselves completely from where we are. See, there is another thing from the Jnani's perspective. The wakeful state is another dream, and the sleep state, these are all different kinds of stages of the dream. But however, there is something very special been given about the waking state. And this is where we have, it is only in this state that we have to make that effort. Once we go to sleep, or when we are in the dream state, then that effort is not felt, is not it it does not become practical or applicable anything. So the spiritual applications can only be practiced in the waking state, and it is in this state that we find that we are faced with something very unique. One is the awareness, that there is a pure awareness which we see as our conscious witness. And when we tune ourselves to this awareness, we start to feel the sense of the presence. And this sense of the presence makes us feel that being that we are at this moment, that beingness. And this beingness, when we look more deeper into that, this comes to feeling of I am, as you could say, that you can leave it with I am, or I am that I am, as Rishi Ramana always puts it to. So, however, as I said, we have to look from both sides, and as Sister Nehru ji is mentioned, that there is the self as well as there is a personality as well. So they both are actually, all is self in that sense. So we have to work from both ends. Just like the teaching says that there is a guru that is within and the guru that is outside. The guru that is within is pulling you to itself, and the guru outside, which is in the form of the personality, is guiding you to that source. So I want to share with something which is to be practical in our day-to-day life. And this will sound something which is very basic and very fundamental, but within this hidden is that, like that sound in the music, that friendship which has been mentioned, like between Gandhiji and Tagoreji. So these are some of key things to be noted and to be practiced in our day-to-day life. And the idea is that every activity is to be seen as the activity permeated by divinity. Without divinity, there is nothing possible. That means like all is self and self is all. So I will try to share something, as I said, which could be very practical in our day-to-day life, and this can be used from the level of a kindergarten in spirituality up to the highest level, when they, as a realized person, how they feel towards themselves and to the rest of the fellow beings. And we all know that keeping in the view of that unity and the oneness of the entire creation, how to conduct, the whole thing is how to conduct ourselves, and it can be only conduct through right actions. So these are a few things which I will now quote. Never use foul words against another. Such words should not rise from our tongue, nor should they enter the ears of others. Remember, there is God inside our heart as well as in the heart of all the rest. He, the self or the God, hears and sees all things. Do not say, do you not say, my head, my hands, my eye, my mind, my idea? Now, who is this I that owns the body, the mind, the brain? That I is the spark of God that is in you, the spark that is in everyone. So when you use harsh, cruel, angry, foul words against another, the God or the self in you and the God in the other person is hurt. Now, this is something day-to-day reality that we come across. The another thing that I want to show is how we can spiritualize everything that we do. We cannot just separate ourselves like doing some exercise or meditation for a few minutes or couple of hours and then the life backs to the normal. It has to be like 24/7. Whatever, so here I will quote again, whatever you do it with dedication. That is Shraddha. The secret of happiness is not doing what you like, but liking what you do. Every act must be suffused with selfless love. If you say, I cannot, I can do only those acts with love that I like to do, that is not the right attitude on the path of spirituality. Whatever you do, infuse it with interest and love. See all work as spiritual exercise, as an offering. Then work is transformed into worship. And that is what I would consider at this time as some practical applications through our spiritual journey. Considering the time been allocated, and I thank everyone and wish you all the very best in your journey towards self-realization. Thank you, NLG.
Thank you, Damodaranji. Quite interesting. You went quite deep into it. Vijayji, you there, Vijayji?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, please.
Yes, it was on mute.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Anilji. Today's topic is practical applications of spirituality. And when we talk about practical applications of spirituality, it is within the framework of manifestation, within the framework of this universe. So recently, we've had a very beautiful and a wonderful offering of 9 days of worship to God as Mother, which is Navaratri. And to that divine, absolute, dynamic aspect of that spiritual glory, we'll just offer a, a couple of shlokas with love and dedication. Om. सर्वमङ्गलमाङ्गल्ये शिवे सर्वार्थसाधिके शरण्ये त्र्यम्बके गौरी नारायणी नमोऽस्तु ते सृष्टिस्थितिविनाशानां शक्तिभूते सनातनी गुणाश्रये गुणमयी नारायणी नमोऽस्तु ते शरणागत दीनार्थ परित्राणपरायणे सर्वस्यार्तिहरे देवी नारायणी नमोऽस्तु ते. We offer this, and is these shlokas are dedicated to that supreme, absolute, dynamic aspect of that potentiality. So, when we talk about the practical aspects of spirituality, we are talking about aspects of the spirituality that a personality wants to achieve. And spirituality, the word spirituality surrounds and encompasses only for the personality, because in the self there is no such thing as spirituality and non-spirituality. That has to be clearly understood. So as a personal self, as a personality, as the individual self, one is seeking, as it were, happiness. And happiness as the goal is what one is trying to achieve and seek throughout. Whether one is within the framework of spirituality or whether one is consumed within the world and day-to-day living in at work, etc. Everyone is only and only trying to achieve happiness. So that happiness aspect is an innate and the very basis of that personality, because that is the only and only thing one wants to achieve, because that is our true nature. There is no difference between happiness, true happiness, and the self. They call it by different words. The pure self, they call it happiness, they call it bliss, they call it, Sat Chit Ananda, absolute existence, absolute consciousness, absolute bliss. But these are only words. So happiness itself, one wants to achieve and be in abidance and in absorption as self. But one has to realize that we are already that self which we are seeking. We already are that happiness. Happiness is our true nature. But we have covered ourselves with this personality, so called business, and identify with the personality, which is the image on the screen of consciousness. We are that eternal, ever abiding self, that pure consciousness, as the screen. But as an analogy is the screen. But the identification that we do is with the images which come and they go. Today, the image is happy, tomorrow, the image is sad, one day, the image is in pain. But when the identification takes place, there is suffering as well. So the doership aspect and the attachment to that image and the personalities. And the personalities are many, numerous. I, as an individual man, woman, boy, girl, husband, wife, father, mother, son, daughter, engineer, doctor, educationist, artist, singer. There are numerous personalities, and there could be infinite number of personalities. But that is the beauty of that expression of that infinitude, which is the self. The self is infinite, and so the expressions in the wake of that totality of consciousness, which is the screen, which is the absolute, the self, the expressions would also be infinite. So that eternal potential, unmanifested self, within itself is contained the expression as the dynamic aspect, the manifested aspect of this creation, this manifestation, which is termed as images, because the images are not different to the screen. So also this world of images and personalities is not different from the self. The changeless, which is that potential self, eternal self, unmanifested self, the changeless, is not different from the changing. They are one and the same. It is only an expression. In the Indian philosophies and in the scriptures, it is termed as Shiva and Shakti. And this is being referred to because we've just gone through the worship of God as mother, 9 days worship, where the mother, God as mother, slays all these negativities, these things that are the non self, these attached personalities, which are images. She slays in her wonderful and benign, loving manner, which then reveals the truth on the 10th day as Vijayadashami, which is the revelation of truth, because she bestows the grace of love, bestows the grace of abidance and absorption in the self. So, that aspect of Shiva and Shakti, Shiva representing the potential, unmanifested, eternal self, and Shakti as the dynamic, manifested aspect of the self. They are not different, they are the same. Shiva and Shakti are the same. Similarly, the changeless and the changing are the same. So, when that, on the premise of this discussion, let's find out what are the practical applications of spirituality. Now, when you talk about the practical applications, there could be two aspects to it. One is the practical application from the standpoint of personality as a doer. When the attachment is there to the image and the personalities, there are practices that could be applied in spirituality to remove what is the non-self, not to achieve anything, because there is no achievement. You already are that self. There is no, one has to remember that has to be all the time at the back of the mind. That, and that's a bit of a misnomer, because mind, back of the mind is, the mind itself is the game which is creating this ego, this I, which has to be transcended. But that is the only instrument that a personality has to work with. And hence, when the ego is very strong and practices have to be applied in spirituality, one has to go through all the various scriptural practices of loving, serving. The practical aspect is serving people selflessly without any expectation. Because when that is done, the ego gets mellow, it becomes smaller. You're not boosting the ego is subdued, it goes away. So, serving, loving, selflessly loving, serve, love, give, you're giving, and then purify yourself by doing all the practices, the breathing practices, you're doing, yoga practices. So the body gets purified, the mind gets purified, because yoga, the aspect of yoga is not just for physical, it tones up the mind as well, tones up the body and the mind. And slowly the mind gets thinner and thinner. And then you do inquiry. When the mind becomes thinner and thinner, automatically the mind then starts practicing the inwardness. So, using that same mind, which is used for the outward expression and connecting with the world and creating a duality, because when there is, the mind is thrown outwards, there is duality, me and the other. But when that mind is turned inwards, it doesn't remain as the mind, because that mind turned inwards goes straight down and disconnects with the outward. When that disconnection happens, the doership drops away because it goes straight down to the source from where that I arose. And then that revelation of truth automatically happens. But these are the practical applications when the personality is present as I, me, as a doer, as the image, as the personality. But when the establishment or the revelation as the self is revealed, and there is complete abidance in that self and absorption as self, then the practical applications work out as not I or the personality doing it, but the self as the personality expressing itself. Not the I as the personality working through it, which is the limited, but the limitless, which is the changeless, expressing itself in manifestation as that personality. And that work goes on. In Sage Ramana, in Bhagwan Ramana Maharshi, the expression was being the talking, the working, the walking up the hill of that body mind took place for 40, 45 years after realization. But that was not the personality expressing itself through the ego mind, but it was that changeless, eternal self functioning through that body mind. Because there was no, it was for the other people who was the devotees who used to come, who used to see that there was an expression of the person talking, and they used to possibly think that, oh, it is Raman Maharshi speaking as an individual, but not so. It was that changeless absolute reality expressing itself through that body mind, which was termed as Sage Ramana, Bhagwan Ramana Maharshi. So the practical applications can be then termed not as practical applications when there is self absorption. We can term that as practical expression of spirituality, because that expression is without any basis, it just expresses itself from changeless to changing as an expression, because they are not different. The changing and the changeless are not different. Even so, now, as we are discussing, as this discussion is happening, expression is always happening through the changeless as the changing. But this notional, imaginary personality attaches itself as I am doing it. That is the only and only issue about this entire world of spirituality, where the little ego, the I as the personality, claims, arrogates itself into saying, I'm doing it. Really, there's no such thing. The expression has always, it will always be the changeless expressing itself as changeless. In Sage Ramana's case, the doership was gone. That attachment of personality was gone and the expression was going on. In most of the cases where the individual considers oneself as the individual, as the personality, and is functioning as that, the expression is different. So the practical expression in spirituality for that personality is considering oneself as that body mind, striving to achieve what one already is, the changeless. When that becomes completely firm and one continues to strive, and people say it's, there is a lot of people have that expression, then nothing needs to be done in spirituality. Well, if that is the case, if nothing needs to be done, then how come nobody has been able to reveal that truth to oneself? It's because effort does need to be applied. When that personality aspect is strong, when the ego aspect is strong, the ego is only an ephemeral, notional thing. But in the framework of that personality, despite it being notional and imaginary, the suffering is still taking place. So the suffering, the striving is always to get rid of that suffering, to be able to be always happy. So as Sage Ramana always says, there is nothing wrong in striving for happiness. There is nothing wrong in searching for happiness. The only and only thing is, because that's our true nature, but the only and only thing is the personality, the people, the I, the egos, the individuals are actually seeking it outside in the wrong place when it is actually within. It's inside you. So the the beauty of this thing is that there's a small story about this where somebody drops a pin outside on the uh, in the room, in the house, in on the bed, and then or a watch or something, and then he goes outside and he looks outside and he's searching for the watch outside the house, and somebody comes and asks him, what are you searching for? Oh, my watch is uh, uh, you know sorry, mistake, he was wearing it on his wrist, and he goes outside searching for the watch everywhere, and he can't find the watch. And they say, what are you searching for? Oh, I'm searching for my watch outside. Maybe it's lying somewhere outside. And but then the wise man comes and looks around and he says, hey, you've got it on your wrist. What are you searching for? You already have it with you. It's with you. It's part of you. He said, oh, I never realized it. That is similar to what all these practices are. All the time we are seeking for truth outside when the truth is already with us, within us, inside us. We already are that. Seeking has to happen. Seeking is the only truth. When that seeking happens and that non-self, the personality is drop away, automatically the revelation of truth dawns as that ever eternal truth, which we already are. So striving is a must. Effort is a must on the path of revealing what is always effortless. We already are that effortless self, eternal, absolute, ever existing self. So these are the two practical applications when the, just to quickly summarize in 2 minutes, is the practical applications of spirituality as a personality, as a doer, as a ego, body, mind, and the practical applications when the revelation as in self-absorption is revealed, the practical applications are a practical expression because there's no application that time. The expression is free because the changeless expresses itself as the changing. Hari Om Tat Sat. Om पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. Thank you,
All right.
Anishji.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Vijayji. Very beautifully spoken, as you always do. If anybody wants to, have a discussion or has any query, please, you're most welcome. We can continue for another few minutes. Anybody has any questions or anything you would like to discuss? Vijay, just unmute your thing, that so that if there's anybody.
Okay.
Yeah. Is there anybody who wants to put in a comment, have a discussion, have a query? Everyone seems to be quiet.
Absorbed in silence. That's
Yeah. You want to say a few more words, Vijayji, while someone comes in?
Thank you,
some.
Vijayji. I
Yes,
think
yes.
this was very beautifully concluded. The expressions
The video has
that
gone off, the mother.
correct. Just-
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
So I think the concluding summary, which was very well put by Vijayji, is how the workings of the personality in one hand and also the expression of that final realization, how that actually happens in the real life, as has been demonstrated in the life of Sage Ramana and the great sages. I believe that the core message in our entire discussions today is to be taken that a sincere effort, striving at all times, in all places, is a must. And this spirituality is a very universal way. And the beauty of this is that whichever path that is suited for you, you take on that path, and that path will lead you to that goal. They say, we can reach the Rome by various routes. All the rivers, they all merge into that ocean of the self. It is, it is only when we actually choose a path, then when we are sincere in our effort on that path, the guru and the guide in some manifested form will appear to lead us. As the saying goes from the Shastras, that when we take the first sincere step, the guru takes 100 steps towards us. So it is always the core thing is to ask ourselves how sincere, how dedicated, how committed we are. And according to the Shastras, it's mentioned that we have to begin with karma, which is the karmanishta, then transforming that karma into the goal of realization, which is regarded as dharmanist, and finally merging into Brahm, the self, which is called Brahmanistam. So these are, as I said, we are very grateful to the great sages that has left us this wisdom, this ancient wisdom. of how the path can be taken. And again, Vijayji has very beautifully explained how this Navratri actually relates to our self unfoldment into the path of realization. So whichever path you take, whether you take the path of the Shakti, which is the energy part, or you take the path of the way that Shiva has taken into the absorption, it leads to the same goal, but we should not think that they are separate. In fact, all the path, whichever path you take, they are all interdependent. You might call it karma yoga, bhakti yoga, jnana yoga, raj yoga, but there is the word there is called yoga. Yoga means to unite, and uniting yourself to the real self, that who we really are. And with these few words, I would like to say, if, as I said, Anilji has put this platform as open. If there is any um, questions, queries, and everyone is available, right from Rajiv ji, Vijay ji is here, Anil ji is here, and Renu ji is here as well. So please feel free to raise any questions we have. We are all like in one spiritual family, trying to help each other to realize our goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Damodaranji. Anyone else would like to say a few words? Neeruji, are you there?
Yes.
Yeah, would you like to say something?
I think it's all well explained using different perspectives. The key thing is that we choose any path that's appropriate, but the essence is that the doership, the attachment, like with the sense of doing the activity instead of seeing it as an expression of the consciousness, unfolding or expressing it in the form of that activity or an experience or whatever perception. So doership is the main barrier. That's what I guess. Yeah. So if we choose any path and we take care of that we don't cling to that doership, so then I think the practice will be easier, because the main problem is the doership, which arises the identification that we have done this or we are better in doing this. So that arises an image, like a self-image, and that gives more power to ego. So if we want to weaken the ego or we want to get rid of the ego, I mean, get rid in the sense that it's not that we are forgetting it. Of course, we need that to function in our lives, to look after our family, to perform in our professional life and all that stuff. But the main thing is to look at the ego in the sense that it is an expression of the bigger consciousness, the space that's the reality of us. So they both are coexisting. So on the dynamic side, I am that personality, the personal self, and in the reality, I am that bigger space in which all the personalities, all the expressions, everything is happening. So just with that perspective, that's what I can say. I think it's all already very well explained today. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Neeruji. Just one last thing that I would say on this is that, you see, when we are talking about doership, look, consciousness is always present. Even as we are talking now and communicating with each other, consciousness is present. And we have put forward this message quite clearly, that everything which is there coming to an end is nothing but an expression of consciousness. So when we actually finally see and conclude that everything is an expression of consciousness, then you see doership is there. I mean, there are hundreds and thousands of millions of people who partake on this form of actually doership. But what is actually realized is that the shift occurs when the doership itself is realized as an expression of consciousness in space and time as an image, right? Then that shift actually occurs, and then the doership is shifted to the changeless reality itself. So anyway, we will have more discussions on that. Anybody in the forum, if is interested in furthering their spiritual knowledge, you are most welcome to personally WhatsApp me or anyone in the group, and we are happy to sort of continue with the communications. So I would like to thank every one of you, from the core of my heart, for having participated, for having given your time, throughout the year in the spiritual discussions that we have had. So we will reconvene end of January, sometime in February, because this is the time when we always have off, which we have had for many years. And with that, I wish all of you the very best in your quest towards to self-abidance and self-absorption. Thank you everyone for joining, and we will reconvene and meet again. Hari Om.